Last round in Canada finally saw one of the two titans of this series finish a race off the podium. Irona may have been saved by the drop points to keep things tight, but both he and Hootaludis have shown they've upped their game in a bid to prove they are the greatest spec racer on iRacing. It's going to take a nearly flawless rest of the season for either of them to come out on top. Will the unpredictability of Watkins Glen smash those hopes? We'll find out soon as we get ready to watch round 9 of the Weekend Warriors presented by Sim Stickers. And you'll see it all live here on the Global SimRacing Channel. Hi, I'm Joe Peak, and with me in the booth is Samuel Ryman. Behind the scenes is our director, the Dr. Amjad Yaman, and he's using cameras provided by Ducky Beard. Sam, the Glen sees a lot of use with the spec racer here on iRacing, but while the drivers know it visually, what are some of the stats about this place?
Well, Joe, you mentioned that this is an unpredictable racetrack, as was our last circuit over at Montreal, but they're both unpredictable for different reasons. Montreal, you got chicane after chicane after chicane, where it's difficult to hit them right every single lap, every single chicane. Here, it's long straight, followed by long straight, and long straight that create drafting battles around this 3.4 mile, 12-10 turn circuit, and that could create some interesting little scraps going on up the hill through the S's on down to the inner loop. And just like we saw last week at Montreal, though, with a great drag race to the finishing line, that is something that this track has in common with Montreal. I know we've seen it happen over in NASCAR many a times. Maybe we'll get another photo finish here at Watkins Glen today. They're doing the boot configuration. Let's take a look at it with our GSRC lap guide.
All right, we've got Stefan Schlacker in the GSRC SRF, so let's do a lap around Watkins Glen. Down into the 90, while this seems like a great place to overtake with the heavy braking, it might be wiser to wait until after the corner. You can see it's easy to outbrake yourself with a downhill plunge. And though the paved runoff can save you, making sure you get a good exit will be much more important. It's flat out all the way up through the S's and down the backstretch, so it's a lot easier to pass someone with a draft on your way to the inner loop. Plus, if you pass them in the 90, they can probably just get you right back riding your slipstream. Now, you can try to outbrake someone into the inner loop, but it's tricky to race side by side. Try to get it sorted out before the first apex, or else you risk banging wheels and taking both of yourselves out. After that, you hit the carousel, which requires a bit of patience with the throttle. Power down too soon, and you'll understeer off wide, where the banking goes away and the car will be drawn to the wall like a magnet. Pretty quickly, you'll have to come back across the track and brake hard for the chute. If you get a slide here, try not to overcorrect because the car will fly straight into the barrier with it being right at the edge of the circuit. Continuing down to the lowest part of the track, you've got a decent passing opportunity into the toe of the boot. But with this being a momentum car, the critical part of this climbing turn is to get on the gas as soon as you can. It's incredibly steep coming off of here, so hesitation will leave you like a sitting duck up to the heel of the boot. This is the last decent place to make a pass stick, but try not to tuck the wheels too far inside because that tiny curb can upset the car. Bringing it back across to the right, turn 9 takes us back to the main circuit. The crest on entry and the off-camber nature makes this very, very difficult to nail consistently. There's not much leeway for error either, with the walls on both sides offering no runoff before you smack them. The penultimate turn is likely going to be single file most of the race, with it only needing a little lift to make it through. Then, before you know it, you're left to tackle the final corner. Despite having a good amount of banking, this turn is rather street course-like. You've got to take it right up to the wall to find the speed, but also make sure you don't throw it away by plowing into it. However, hopefully you've now finished a lap around Watkins Glen. You can see it's not just the challenges of dealing with the draft that these drivers are going to have to contend with, but the challenges of these long, sweeping corners, which don't always play nice with a spec racer. Now, also, life can bring challenges, especially for men in the modern world. Don't let it get you down. Talk to someone. Support for Guys wants to listen and wants to help you realize the potential of a happy life. Their goal is to help you find new ways to cope with life's ups and downs. The approach is simple. Find what works for you and support that new path for a better tomorrow. A counselor is waiting to listen. Visit their website at supportforguys.com. You don't have to be local. Just visit supportforguys.com and you can find that happy life you've been looking for. Big thanks to supportforguys.com for sponsoring the Weekend Warriors this season. And this season has seen a pretty stunning championship. It hasn't been close between many drivers except for 2. So that points championship right now is looking at only a 2-point gap between our top two drivers. Dimitri Houdaloutis and Iro Nam have been on the podium every single race except for the last one where Iro Nam missed out. I mentioned it in the intro. Obviously, he stays close because of those drop weeks. Now, Kane Halliburton is not too far behind, but as the weeks go by, he's losing more and more chances to be able to run them down. And Jason Perry has actually jumped up one position there into 4th, but he's really not as close to Kane Halliburton as he'd like. He's really got to start beating him out on track. Daniel Sadro, with his great finish last race, a podium, he manages to jump up 5 spots to make it up into 5th. We also have a Spec 2 championship. Sam, what's that looking like at this moment?
Well, let's take a quick look here. You'll notice these cars throughout the race, they have 200 numbers on the side of their cars, so that's how you're able to identify them. And you'll see we pretty much have a tie for the points lead right now between Adam Bradshaw and Bob Kern, and with a few rounds left remaining, they'll sort that out between them. But they better keep an eye on their rearview mirrors in these point standings, because Todd Hansen has jumped up a few positions there to move up into 3rd in the points, and Jens Nordstrom also just 11 markers back. They have a bit of a gap over Sea Love there, the British driver, rounding out the top 5 in our standings.
Good to see. It's a pretty tight fight down there for the Spec 2. A lot of talented drivers in that classification. Now, if you're not familiar with the series, you're wondering about that Spec 1 and Spec 2, well, why don't we touch a little bit more about what's to be expected in this race. As we mentioned, we're in round 9 out of 12, and you can see they get 3 drop weeks. That's what I was talking about earlier. The 3 worst results that they have do not count towards their points total. So you can have some mistakes and also have some real life stuff get in the way, keep you away from racing here on the simulator, and don't have to worry about it too much. Now, the setups are open on these cars, but that doesn't mean a whole lot in the Spec Racer because, well, there's not a whole lot you can do in this car. It's a very simple car. They have limited the fuel compared to what you can run in real life in these machines, though, and that means that they do have a scheduled pit stop, which isn't what you'd expect in a real-world race with these Spec Racer Fords. The distance is about 40 minutes. You can see there's that one stop mentioned. And they've actually rationed the points in this series. So even though the podium get the same amount of points each finish, from there on down to the last place, it is rationed to 25 points for that last place finish. The incident penalty that they're talking about, well, if they have an incident which includes a spin, off track, touching another car, touching the wall, if they hit 10 of those, they get 2 points off. 10 more, another 2 points. So you got to be clean out there. You can't just race recklessly and abuse off track to try and gain speed out there during the race. They have one spare car to help save them. But around here, you really don't want to have to use that, because even one lap with any sort of damage, Sam, I think is going to hurt you on these straightaways.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, a lap around this track is taking these drivers about 2 minutes. So if you do get involved in an incident, you're probably going to want to do it towards the end of the lap, so that if you have to take a tow, you're not being towed for that long. But here's the other problem. Let's say you get some minor damage out there and you have to serve an extra pit stop during the race. You don't even have to get a tow. Well, that's really going to cost you, because pit road here at Watkins Glen is very long indeed.
Yep, it can certainly hurt, as we are in the middle of qualifying right now. We're on board. We were on board with Jason Perry, who sits back there in 8th. But this is Bob Kern. Effectively at a home track, I guess we could say, being a New Yorker. He's up to 6. Now, what strikes me as very interesting is it's not Nom or Houdaloutis on pole. It's not even Kane Halliburton. It's Jamie Fluke, who somehow got himself up there. So hopefully we'll see what he can do in the race format, not just getting a single lap pace, because one thing that we haven't really touched on is that single lap pace doesn't really mean quite as much. So this qualifying, I have a feeling, might be a little bit jumbled up depending on what you could hook up with other cars out there, Sam.
Yeah, but even if Fluke's lap was a fluke, I mean, he also ran a 2:08.1 out there, which would have put him 6th on the grid. So maybe there's some consistency to be found in that number 49 machine. In fact, he actually ran even faster in practice, a 2:07.2. Right now, Fluke holding a 10th of a second lead on the provisional pole spot over Jonathan Madden, with just a tick under 5 minutes left to go in this session. Lots of cars still out there on track.
Well, taking a glance at Jamie's both iRating and his class, a 7,000 iRating, and, well, he's got a black stripe. I don't think that was a fluke lap for him. Edward Doherty currently running around in 9th down there, just behind Jason Perry, another New York driver, working to get himself as high up as he can, and actually our second highest Spec 2 driver. One of our podium finishers last race, Midwesterner Daniel Sadro, sitting in 11th, has a little bit more time to find right now. He's giving a tow to both Ironam and John Madden behind him, which are employing the usual Ferrari strategy that we tend to see as he pulls out of the way of them and lets them through. Both Nalm and Madden by this point in the season have basically made it tradition that they've helped each other try to get farther up the qualifying times with a bit of a tow.
Yeah, you mentioned Doughty being back there, currently 9th on the grid, the second highest Spec 2 driver. The highest Spec 2 driver on the grid is currently Bob Kern. He is 6th place with a 2:08.6. And what's surprising about that, honestly, is he's a full second back of a car in 5th. That might end up with 5 cars pulling out a pack of their own at this rate.
Which I'm sure they'll be glad about as Chris Murakami sends this Rising Sun car off into the gravel in spectacular fashion. James Tibor, however, will be able to complete this lap, but it's very slow, so looks like he actually might be on an out lap. And it looks like that, yeah, that is Nam behind him. That last one, was that faster? Oh, that last one didn't count for Ironam, actually. The driver ahead of him, his teammate John Madden, did count, but it did not improve his lap time.
Yeah, I mean, the way this race is going to break up into packs, I mean, honestly, I think it's more just for bragging rights you're going to want pole position here. If you qualify 2nd, 3rd or 4th, if you really want the lead, you can get it going into the inner loop on that opening lap.
Yep, it's all going to be more a matter of strategy around here. Stevie Ray, the league organizer, running around in the number 11, the Texas driver, currently down in 20th. Relatively large field, which is not a huge shocker. 40-plus cars out there, and since it's a long lap, it shouldn't be too much of an issue, although traffic towards the end of the race may cause a few headaches. Again, it'll be more down to that draft and how the cars handle it. Just about a minute and 45 left here in the qualifying. Now, I jotted a few notes about the stats because we're getting pretty deep in the season, Sam. One of the things that I found interesting does, I think, relate to the draft and how this car is so susceptible to it in most tracks here on iRacing. Ironam, despite, finishing on the podium for all but one race so far, has not led the most laps, and in fact, it's not even close. He's led only a third of the laps that Hudaludis has this race. And I have a feeling that comes down to the way that Ironam tends to play these races out in terms of fuel strategy.
And that could definitely be a factor today because of these long straights we've been talking about. There is a lot of potential to save fuel during this 40-minute race. So Nom could be a bit of an advantage here, given the fact that he has plenty of experience with racing a fuel strategy race. There may be some drivers will have to adapt to that kind of racing today if they're not familiar with it, if they want to play that card and get a good finish. Another stat that's not nearly as useful is the amount of drivers who have been incident-free during qualifying. I always like to keep an eye on that. It gives you an idea of which drivers might be able to navigate their way through the field without any drama. Jonathan Madden, Francesco Bernardo, and Andreas Bertoni. So kudos to those drivers. Hopefully they'll have a clean race too.
Yep, there are some difficult parts to try and keep your car from getting incidents around here, which can affect the qualifying. If you're not familiar with iRacing, if one of those incidents, which is basically off tracks, if the half of your car goes over the edge of the track limits, they do not count that lap because they want to keep it fair so that nobody's gaining an unfair advantage. McAreevy is not gaining advantage. In fact, that lap is going to end his qualifying, unfortunately. And he didn't get a qualifying lap, and that actually surprises me, so he's going to have to come from behind. Meanwhile, other drivers who are finishing their lap right now, Perry's going to give up on his. Fred Desai is going to be the next one to cross the line. He's in 21st. As he comes off that final corner, let's see if this one's going to count for him, Sam.
You'll watch as Desai crosses the finish line here, doesn't improve. I just mentioned that Andres Bertoni hasn't scored a single incident point during qualifying at all, Joe. There's a reason for that. He only just joined the qualifying session. He's actually on... Actually, I'm not entirely sure. He might be on an outlap here. Andres Bertoni might be without a qualifying lap as well.
That's bad news for him. We're riding on board with John Madden. He's following behind Iro Nam right now. Madden sits in second. Nam is in fourth. So even though Nam is ahead, he's the one that needs a little bit more. He's all the way at the back of the second row. As they come down to finish the lap, let's see if either of them improve on their time. Nam crosses. He improves, but only goes up to third, and Madden does not improve his. So front row going to have one of the Bushfink cars. Second row going to have one of the Bushfink cars. See who else is finishing up. Looks like Murakami does not improve as he goes across the line. Mostly the lower tier drivers are the ones finishing up, and with about 1:17 left, I think James Tabor already finished his last lap. In fact, yes, he comes to a halt. So that is going to be it for all of our drivers in qualifying. Let's go through our starting grid, over 40 of them here today. Jamie Fluke with his black stripe, hoping to try and show these guys how it's done. Although we have seen him here before in the Spec Racer. He'll be on pole. Again, won't mean too much, as Sam mentioned, with John Madden flanking him on the outside of that front row. Iro Nam, who is currently chasing Hootalutus in the championship, will be starting in third. Kane Halliburton will be next to him in fourth. And Dimitri all the way down in the third row. We talked about it, though. There's a big gap from him to the next car. Dimitri starts fifth. Stevie Ray managed to improve his qualifying all the way up to sixth, with Alan Chapman starting in seventh. The first of our Spec 2 drivers, we talked about it. He has not been overtaken in that qualifying by any of the other Spec 2 drivers. Will start eighth, with Philippe Chauvin starting in ninth. Then it's Ross Nicholson rounding out our top 10, being the next car down in Spec 2.
Spec 1 drivers on row number 6, with Jason Perry and Michael Shaw. Our third place Spec 2 driver, Edward Doughty, will start from 13th place. David Stefanini will be starting on to his outside 14th. And right in the middle of the field now we're going are Stephen Elson and Daniel Sadro. Donald Fitterer back there, alongside him, Antonio Reese, Jens Nordstrom and Chris Murakami round out the top 20. This is where I really wouldn't want to be starting, Joe.
Yeah, it's in the thick of the action for sure. James Tabor will start in 21st, with Fred Desai in 22nd. Francesco Bernardo will be P23, and he'll be flanked by Jeff Jacobson in 24th. Adam Bradshaw, one of the drivers that has been towards the top in the Spec 2 most of the time, is starting a little bit farther down. He'll be 25th overall. Keith Walsh starting 26th, with Francois Van Dornveld in 27th. Then it's Jeff Cantor starting 28th. Ramon Regalato will be P29, and then that row is rounded out by Paul Godin. Sam?
Starting in 31st position is Wayne Palmer. To his outside will be C. Love. Tom Gradwell will be starting from 33rd place, ahead of Edgar Santinelli. Miro Hrozatsky is back there in 35th place, ahead of Karsten Rudolph. Ian Wilson will be starting from 37th, Todd Hansen behind him, and 40 cars turned to time in qualifying. Brian Norman and Andres Bertoni, although I believe that was an outlap, that's why you see that lap time is quite off the pace.
McAreevy and Barbuza are the only two cars that did not get lap times in. And again, Jerry McAreevy tends to be a front runner, so expect to see him to have to do a lot of work during this 40-minute race. Unfortunately for him, even though the draft will help him climb forward, the leaders will probably be stretching away from the rest of the field. You can see it's a rolling start, starting behind the roof pace car here under the gray skies today. And why don't we take a look at that weather here? It's basically pretty cool at the moment. 68 degrees on the track, as well as 68 track temperature. And thankfully for the drivers, not much in the way of wind, so they won't have to worry about that affecting how the car drives here today. Pretty humid out there in upstate New York. That will affect the power somewhat, but otherwise doesn't mean much here in the sim.
Bob Kern had some difficulty, it looked like, during the gridding process. He had to disconnect and reconnect to the server, didn't get back in time. He will have to start from the pits, which is unfortunate because he was scheduled to be our pole sitter as far as that Spec 2 class is concerned.
Yeah, such a shame for the New Yorker to have that disadvantage here on his home track. We're already heading up the S's towards the backstretch with the field, and this is where most of that drafting is expected to happen. It could also lead to problems because we're facing the inner loop layout here, Sam. The braking isn't a whole lot in this car, but we've seen it cause tangles in just about any car that you take on this track.
Let's not sugarcoat it. We've seen multiple big wrecks here, and they can happen going through turn 1, they can happen going up the S's, they can happen in the inner loop, they can happen in the boot. Yeah, they can happen somewhere on the racetrack. Sometimes even somewhere off a racetrack, and then they come back on the racetrack. These drivers in the middle of the field, I know we talk about pack racing around here, but there's a rhyme and a reason to how those packs get broken up, and that's when drivers make a mistake in front of you and there's a lot of walls around and you've got nowhere to go. Indeed,
this track known for it being very tight around you. You can see how close those powder blue walls are to the edge of the track. Very old school style, the way that they've kept it, which makes me happy. Although since this scan that they have on iRacing, there has been a lot more paved runoff. I'll be a little bit sad when that comes to iRacing. Thankfully, we will still have this old version. It'll be curious to see which series elects to use the old version and which elects to use the modern version, which gives you a little bit more wiggle room when you make an error. See them now coming up the steep uphill out of the toe of the boot down to the heel of the boot. Pretty long pace lap around here. Thankfully, won't have to deal with it after the pace car pulls off, as there are no cautions throughout this race. It is straight from start to finish out here in the Spec Racer Fords. Leading the way, our World Championship level driver, Jamie Fluke, is going to be leading the way.
I really wish, Joe, I'd seen more drivers warming up their tyres this lap. That's the only thing that concerns me about these good weather conditions you mentioned, is how cold these tyres are going to be when the track temperature is only 68 degrees Fahrenheit on this opening lap.
Yeah, not a whole lot of weaving back and forth that we've seen in these cars. We'll see who it catches out. It will cause a little bit more grip, but that can cause a little bit more snappier cars. So, as the roof pace car pulls off, green flag is out, and wow, there's a huge checkup back in the field, which means some cars got a monstrous jump. A few of them are trying to make it 3 wide, some even 4 wide down into the first corner. This is not good news up here at the front of the field, because if it goes south, the whole field is going to be barreling down on them. They spread out, and oh, Jamie Fluke actually spun as everybody scatters to avoid him. It's causing a few problems towards the back. In fact, now we got a big checkup, and the field is clogging the entire track down into the S's.
The second half of a field is involved in that. It's still going on up the S's. Antonio Reese is flipping over. Wayne Palmer is upside down. Paul Godden is grabbing his way around the circuit, and it all started, I think Alan Chapman, that was the second part of the incident. Obviously, Fluke's spinning, but Alan Chapman was one of the drivers in the middle of that 4 wide, and I mean, look, there's just nowhere to go.
Yep, looks like Stevie Ray involved in it. We're going to watch an on-board Thankfully, we mentioned they do have a spare car, but it will mean a second pit stop. This is from Bernardo's perspective. Happens in front of him. Oh, and you know, it was just complicated, it looks like, by cars trying to take avoidance when they did see that a wreck was happening in front of them.
Here's what happens to Fluke.
Spun by himself, and it looked like they had actually managed to avoid most of it there as everybody got around him, but then because it shuffled everybody heading to where the track narrows, it looks like that's what caused most of the issues. And Fluke, with all his spin, I think managed to pick his way through and get going once again, but he's all the way down in 31st.
All right, well, it's going to be easier to talk about who escaped the wreck and who didn't. So our race leader is Jonathan Madden, his teammate Eero Nom behind him. Then we got Kane Halliburton, Ross Nicholson, Demetrius Huda-Lewis, Edward Doherty, David Stefanini, Jason Perry, Philip Trovin, Stephen Elson, and Alan Chapman rounding out the top 10. But I just want to give props to Alan Chapman because he was the one right in the centre of that 4-wide scenario going into the first turn. I felt for sure he wouldn't have been able to find a way through all that carnage, but he did. And my position's off by 1. He's actually in 11th, not 10th. Must have missed something.
Cool heads prevail as we got a spin. Oh, no. So his teammate McAreevy had problems in qualifying, and Doherty has problems in the race. Turn 1 causing all kinds of problems here for our drivers at the start. This one was all by himself as the rear just went away from him.
Yeah, that could be part of that cold tires. I mean, honestly, it's something similar to what we saw our pole sitter Fluke doing at the start of the race.
Indeed, as we come back live to our top drivers, and Jason Perry, unfortunately, with an issue. And this was in the inner loop. This one, pretty much all himself. If it wasn't himself, he won't know because he apparently doesn't watch the broadcasts. So as he spins himself off, the number 97 gets it going once again, but he is down in 17th.
Yeah, you got a lot of curb on the entry there, and these cars can very easily get upset. I know when I used to race the Spec Racer Ford on iRacing at tracks like Watkins, Glen, I would play with the sprints a lot. Not necessarily for a setup that made me comfortable on the track, but for a setup that made me comfortable over the curbs, knowing that I was stupid enough of a drive, I would probably hit them at some point.
As we see Jason finding himself in a little bit of a battle with Edward Doherty, who also had that spin, almost going 3 wide. Oh, and coming up to one of the more difficult turns. This is turn 9. Doherty almost gets into the back of Perry, but he does get ahead of both of those cars. Hopefully he can stretch away to get away from some of this action. Now, there are championship implications with all the chaos that we saw at the start. Well, actually, no, I take that back. Huda-Lewis, who I thought had dropped off of the leaders, which he is still a little bit back here, has managed to get his way up to 3rd now. He does have a partner in Kane Halliburton, and I suspect those two will be swapping positions because up ahead of them, the pairing is 2 Bushfink drivers working together. That's Nom and Madden. It'll be a question of who can work together better. In fact, they're bump drafting to try to find some pace, is Madden and Nom.
That was a bit of a slam draft, and Nom didn't wait until the track got straight. He did it as they were still going through the kink in the S's there. That could have been real ugly. They must have practiced that for them to do something with that aggressive with that much confidence during the race.
Now, you might have noticed a little bit of smoke happening in the carousel when they were approaching, our leaders were approaching. That was Paul Godin recovering. Because of all the messy racing, Sam, we're already seeing lap traffic becoming a potential factor, and we're not even a third through this race.
By my count, there were at least 10 cars that had to pay a trip to the pits from that opening lap carnage we saw. Now, obviously, they're all able to get a free repair and get back out on track, but that means we got 10 cars that are running not too far ahead of the leaders early on. We've
jumped back to this action between Chauvin, Perry, and Doherty. Doherty currently sitting in 16th, Perry behind him 17th, Chauvin in 18th. They are trying to run down the car of Karsten Rudolph ahead of them, but they seem a little bit more concerned with battling than they are trying to get speed. Oh, and Kane Halliburton, oh, the partner for Hootaludis, has a spin out of turn 9, and he is stuck where he is, waiting for cars to cycle by.
Found a nice gap in the traffic. He might have got a bit of help, actually.
Was there contact there? It looked like the rear just started to come around from him. He just barely touched the wall, so that really shouldn't cause him damage. Let's watch on board the Greek.
One of the more unpopular turns on the circuit. I know that much. There was contact. Yeah, this is a tricky enough turn to get through when everything's going right. It doesn't help when you have another car underneath you.
This is really bad news for Dimitri because now he has no one to help him catch up to Gnome, who has his teammate. So, and I really don't think that John Madden is going to try and beat Eero to the line if it comes to the end. So this is almost looking like a slam dunk for the number 78.
So obviously all the leaders were able to escape that big wreck. The drivers in the middle weren't as lucky, but the other beneficiaries were the drivers who started at the back, and trouble for 25. Into the wall goes Alan Chapman.
That was all his own doing. You talked about the curbs in these cars. It was that second apex you're going to see here. Look at it bounce. There was no saving it from there. Thankfully, another driver that didn't hit anything. I guess that's one good thing about these spec racers in combination with this track, Sam, is that they're not super fast. So even though the walls are close, it seems like they don't have enough speed to really send them slamming into them a lot of times.
Yeah, but whenever you get these lower tech cars, they also don't have always as good brakes as what the more powerful cars have. Meanwhile, that is Fluke behind Chapman, and Chapman's actually just going to pull aside and let Fluke by as he tries to recover from his early mistake. But yeah, and Fluke is actually ahead of a driver I was about to give a shout out, Drevi McAreevy, who I'm sure didn't get that much damage from that opening pile-up because he was behind all of it, and as a result, he's been able to pick off 17 spots in our opening 4 laps.
Now, I almost wonder if Chapman letting Fluke by is more due to him just saying, you know, here's one of the fastest drivers on the track. I'm just going to ride in his slipstream from here on out. Oh, as Bertoni, we saw having one of the more precarious incidents that this track tends to produce, which is heading towards that pit entry. And he immediately takes it down into the pits because of it. The Hispano-American driver does take a hard slam into the Armco.
Well, if you're gonna wreck, this is exactly the place to do it, and how to do it. You know, that's quicker than a regular pit entry. Small problem, I don't think the pit window is opened yet.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're right. He did take his spare car and he's back out, so it's still gonna hurt quite a bit.
Oh, good scrap going on for 5th place. Stephen Nelson trying to force his way underneath Stefanini at the front of this pack. But now he's on the outside as they head off into the boot section of the court.
Yep, this train includes... Oh, and something happened to McAreevy. Oh, the inner loop catches another victim. And we'll look at the replay. He was following behind Cantor and Sadro. And yet another car that the curbs just do not agree with. But... as we come back live, that battle that we were watching, that includes now Steve Elson up at the front ahead of Stefanini. Battling side by side is Fitterer and Nicholson. They're going to try to get that settled out. They're trailed by Nordstrom and Tabor. Almost contact between Nicholson and Fitterer down into turn 9, but they get away with it as everybody strings back straight in a line.
Yeah, Nicholson has not had a good lap. Might have missed a bad run for him out of turn 1. Not entirely sure how he got back there, but he was 4th the last time across the line, and now he's dropped back a few spots.
Well, he's got a chance to recover it as they come down the pit straight, braking into the 90. We'll see how they start to fan out as they come up the hill. Who gets a good exit? Who gets the draft? All of them giving the curb a wide little bit of gap. Nobody willing to hit it, it seems, as this cold weather seems to have exacerbated the way the car is bouncing around and snapping. Steve Elson pretty much a sitting duck as Stefanini, even before the backstretch, pulling it too wide.
And so Stefanini will take that position. That actually helps these two. They're able to both maintain their momentum, and Elson gives Stefanini a little bump, and Fitterer will just have to stay there in 6th place as they work their way through the inner loop, trying to avoid the spinners.
Yeah, that separated Nordstrom, Nicholson, and Tabor from these three. So what was a 6-car battle looks like it is thinning out as Elson takes a little bit of a peek to the outside, down into the chute. Stefanini defends and doesn't give him the opportunity. As that's happened, sounds like Jamie Fluke has come in for what we expect should be a scheduled stop.
Might not be a bad idea if your race isn't going to plan. Try something different. He's got clean racetrack.
Yeah, certainly is the case. Well, Stefanini and the car of Elson were side by side for a moment there, coming up towards the heel of the boot, but it looks like Stefanini is going to come out ahead of those two. Right on.
This is a pack going from 4th all the way back to 9th place as they navigate their way through that off-camber left-hander.
Right on board with Fitterer at the moment, watching that battle ahead. The group of 3 behind has re-caught them. So what I thought was a wide enough gap turns out not to be the case. Maybe it was all that side-by-side racing as they come back onto the front stretch. Very different lines through that final corner between Elson and Stefanini.
Well, they stay single file for now. Let's make note that with help from the free repair rule, we only actually have 4 retirements from the race, or 4 drivers that look like they're out there. Raymond Regalado, Brian Norman, Paul Godden, and Antonio Rees.
Well, and there we see our leaders still bump drafting, and it is working. They're now 3.5 seconds away from Dimitri. So this is essentially all they have to do for the moment in the race, is just to try to continue to pull that gap, work together, not really worry about who's in front.
Yeah, and I mean, Dimitri's just having a quiet little race going for himself in 3rd right now. Also, of course, Madden and Nom are going to be able to save more fuel using the drafting effect like that. So maybe he's just going to want to settle in and ride in 3rd for now before anything changes, because he's got 9 seconds over Stefanini. So Dimitri is looking for a solid podium finish if nothing dramatic happens. You see, we're already nearly approaching the halfway point of this race.
Should see a few cars maybe try to duck in, use a little bit of strategy to get rid of one another. Elson find himself a nice little gap over Stefanini at the moment, but that's not enough to try and break the draft. Still 6 cars battling together. The first big group we've got in the field here, starting from 4th place.
The second one is from 15th on back, or around there. Actually, from 12th on back. Alan Chapman is at the front of it, being followed by Jason Perry, Kane Halliburton, C. Love, and Jeff Jacobson. However, if they can all work together, Philippe Chauvin isn't too far ahead of them in 11th.
Yep, that could certainly increase it by 1 more, and I think that's what Alan Chapman is spying right now. We're right on board looking back at Spider-Man. It's being closely chased by Kane Halliburton. So many drivers out of their usual position from what we're used to in this series. Halliburton typically looking to win races, and who's that peeling off? That is Chauvin.
Maybe he saw Chapman coming from behind him, like, oh, I don't want him to use my draft, run me down, I'll just pit now. Now he doesn't have anyone to work with in front.
Now, I'm curious where Chauvin will come out in terms of Jamie Fluke. Fluke is our highest pitter that we think has taken a scheduled stop, and he's actually coming around the final corner right now. Chauvin still stationary. He's down to the 90, he's past Chauvin. Chauvin just getting going now, so Jamie Fluke well and easily by. As you said, getting very close to that halfway mark. The Frenchman returns to the track, ready to take it all the way to the finish. We got a little bit of a battle between 16th, 17th, and 18th. Rudolph, Sadro, and Cantor got themselves a little group coming through the outer loop at the moment.
You've got about 5 seconds of clean air ahead of them, 5 seconds of clean air behind them, so these drivers have got two options here: either work with each other and run down the guys in front, or say sod it and do some battling between them. Right now it seems they're content just to run single file like that, although Sadro a little bit late on the brakes. Of course, there's always an advantage to saving fuel.
Yeah, we haven't paid that close attention to that. It seems like most of the groups we've come to seem to be swapping positions a lot, although thinking about that first group of 6, some of those drivers in the back don't seem to be as interested in switching places around. That would be Nicholson and Tabor. Tabor especially has been at the back of that group for a while. I wonder if he's being a little sneaky in that car.
Fitterer into the pits. Another driver as well. Nope, just Fitterer.
Do you think that'll hurt him, Sam, that he'll have nobody to work with, that he's pitting by himself?
Well, there's so many cars out here, even if he, I don't know if he's been calculating his pit delta during the 1 hour practice session we had, but he could always come out into another pack.
Let's see if he does. He's finished his stop. Back going once again. Again, these cars don't really take tires during the stop. It's just fuel.
Oh, Rudolph has spun, and he's right there on pit exit. He might have to navigate his way around Rudolph here. There he goes. Very narrow there. And I'm not sure if he might actually get a black flag for crossing that line.
Well, we'll find out soon enough. Let's watch Fitterer. It's a shame because it's automated, so he can't exactly appeal to the stewards on that one. He might indeed get a penalty, because from that onboard it looked like he crossed that yellow line, which, if I recall, you are not allowed to do. His only option really was to just brake, which would still lose him quite a bit of time as well.
And in a car such as unstable as this, sometimes slamming on the brakes isn't your best decision.
Well, he is our highest pitter now. He is out well ahead of Jamie Fluke. In fact, he's got roughly, it looks like 4 or 5 seconds ahead of him. This is Fluke actually in the thick of a battle right now.
Yeah, see, you might think, oh, well, Fluke is able to save fuel here and, play a bit of strategy with these drivers in the pack, use their draft. Well, not so, because he has such a pace advantage over most of these drivers running around in the 20s and the high teen positions, that these guys are actually more of a burden to him, to be honest, than what they are helping his cause. That's why he's trying to make some aggressive passes here and get by them in a hurry.
And those aggressive passes are being successful so far. Jamie Fluke up to 21st and nearly done with this pack. It's Miro Hrasky, the only one he has left to overtake.
Love into the pits for a scheduled stop. I'm keeping an eye on Fitterer, and yes, he is coming back in to serve a penalty.
Oh, that's a shame for Donald Fitterer. Really was not his fault. You can see that 211 going to have to trundle down one of our Spec 2 drivers. Now, what's interesting is Jamie Fluke did not pass Hrasky on the front stretch, even though he easily could have. This, to me, is a sign of a very smart driver. He's waiting for here, where that draft is going to be so much more monstrous, climbing up the S's.
Yeah, he's a bit full back of Hazarski here, but I think he's trying to time this run to perfection. He already has a 5-mile-an-hour advantage, and there you can see what it does. He's also got to be careful that Bob Kern doesn't think about sticking his nose out. Well, right now, Bob Kern is actually boxed in, and he's only just going to be able to pull off a pass ahead of Hazarski.
That was a great illustration of just how powerful the draft is. Even our director seemed doubtful on whether or not he could catch Hraski, and he blew by him with a ton of time. We're now well past the halfway point, waiting on a lot of our top drivers to come in. Jamie Fluke is your highest pitter. The next car behind him has pitted Bob Kern, but he has not taken a scheduled stop. He has one more pit stop to go.
And let's give a shout out to Demetrius Hudelouis. Even though he's burning more fuel than Martin and Nom, because he's not running in the slipstream of anyone, he's not receiving any bump drafts, he's still only about 3 seconds back of our top two. And if things, if something does happen up front, or he gets a quick pit in or pit out, Hudelouis could still be in this.
We're riding on board with Nom. You see him. Oh, no, I was going to say you're going to see him pop out. He's actually going to just bump draft Madden all the way down the backstretch.
Look what he's done to the rear of his car. I mean, the rear end of Madden's car doesn't look as pretty as it did at the start.
Wonder, let's see. Yeah, it doesn't look like that's caused damage to Nom's front. So maybe just a hard shove earlier in the race did not line up well with John. And that could be slowing them down, because Dimitri Hudelouis is now 2.7 back. It was about 3.5 seconds before.
Almost wonder if Hudelouis is actually getting a bit of a draft off of those top two.
Do you think from 2.5 seconds back, is it that powerful?
I'm not sure. Just speculating.
All right. As they climb up the hill, a little bit more traffic in the way in the form of Wayne Palmer. So far, hasn't caused them too bad of a headache. They're just catching them one at a time, so it's easier for them to get out of the way. But once they catch one of those backpacks that are fighting each other for position, boy, then it's going to get hairy. See if anybody else is electing to come in as our leaders swing around that penultimate corner up towards the final turn. Both of them look to be staying out. They're going to swap once more. And
this race is obvious.
I was going to say, that car that you can see in the background behind them, the black and white machine, that is Hudelouis.
Yeah, as Stephen Elson comes in. This race is...
Whoa!
Whoa!
That was a big mistake there from John Madden coming through, or excuse me, that was Nom. Nom going way wide, having to swing back onto the course and almost losing the car and hitting his teammate. That would have been awkward.
And yet they only lost a few tenths of a second to Demetrius.
Let's watch the replay now that we've gone down the backstretch and waited to see what happened from there. Just way too deep into the corner. He was way off the apex. It's a good thing that he wasn't, a tenth back on the course, because he definitely would have plowed into his teammate.
Yeah, it was definitely a scare there. Meanwhile, we mentioned right before that Elson had came into the pits. He just rejoined, and he is right behind Fluke. So Fluke with the advantage over Elson.
Wow, after all that, even with the spin, Elson was, let's see, 4th place it was? So Fluke should effectively be working his way back up to 4th place after pit stops are done, potentially 5th.
Well, we'll wait and see. We should find our answer very shortly, because these cars can only go so much further on fuel.
Yeah, it's getting towards the end. About 12 minutes left to go. Should be the very end of how far most of these drivers should be able to make it. We're watching our leaders, and only one is coming in. Dimitri follows him. Now, will he take his spare car? Will he take repairs? Because we saw the damage on the back of Madden. He might not know about it, though, necessarily.
Well, Nom is his teammate. He might have informed him.
Well, I mean,
Stefanini and Nordstrom in as well. It looks like pretty much everyone coming in, with the exception of Nom and Halliburton, who have been able to stretch out an extra lap of fuel.
and that car popped back into place. I think he actually did take his spare car.
I don't see why not. He's out here racing for the win.
If he could manage to get Ironom to communicate in multiple words to him that there's damage, then he's more talented than us.
Elson has gone for a spin. We talked about his little battle out there going on with oh boy, and now he backs in the wall trying to get it going back the right way again. The car wasn't damaged until then.
Oh, that curb on the exit. Wow, he barely tapped it. Yeah, if he would have known where that Armco was, he would have gotten away clean. God, the bounces, the bumps around this track have been nightmarish. Only 2 cars are yet to pit. It's Ironom and Kane Halliburton. Now, that doesn't count the drivers that came in to get damaged repair, to get a spare car at the start of this race, mind you, but they won't be affecting the front of the field nearly as much.
Nom is about to come around to pit entry, so we're about to find out how much fuel he has saved. As we mentioned, he's kind of a professional in the fuel-saving industry.
Almost Dixon-esque, the way that he is able to use that to his advantage, and he is indeed, you can see, hugging the inside and taking that pit entry. Halliburton was not so, or excuse me, not Halliburton, Madden was not so cautious about staying tight to the inside of that corner. I wonder if he maybe gained a little bit of ground, taking more aggressively on that pit entry. Just to tell you how much of a gap they had made to Halliburton, Madden, even with his pit stop, is right behind Halliburton, who now pits as well. Nom has exited out. And, oh, he's going to have a pretty good gap to John.
That's the advantage of having to take less fuel, because you burned the less fuel in the first half of your race.
The gap between Madden and Hudaluda stayed about the same at 2.5 seconds, but between Nom and Madden, there is now a 3-second gap. That is a lot of fuel. Two seconds less standing stationary in his stall. I don't want to put on my Bill Zahn hat quite yet, but that's significantly shorter. But now, Sam, I guess it comes down to a little bit less strategy and more to who has the pace, because all 3 of them are by themselves on track.
Yeah, now they get the race it out. And talking about racing it out, we've seen a good battle just outside the top 10 between Alan Chapman, Chris Murakami, and Andres Bertoni. They've been all over each other. Bertoni, let's not... And Chapman, a big slide there. And that is not going to end well for him. So now it's just a battle between Bertoni and Murakami.
And this is the second time we've seen this incident from Chapman. Last time he managed to avoid the barrier. This time he wasn't so lucky. And Tabor manages to avoid some damage as well, although he spins into a horrible blind corner before he's able to get going when the track is clear. Now, back up to P4 here, because we saw this before we ducked out to Chapman. This is Stefanini and Fluke fighting for scraps after Fluke threw away that pole position in the very first corner.
Yeah, but he still might be able to get top 5 out of this, but these two need to be careful. If they battle too hard, Jens Nordstrom will run them both down, and Nordstrom, by the way, is our leader of our Spec 2 drivers out there right now, and 7th overall.
Boy, this is actually very high running for Jens Nordstrom in that Spec 2. We've seen him lead it in the Spec 2 before, but up to 6th place. Obviously, that helped a little bit by... Oh! And Fluke, as we were riding on board, is he saving fuel here?
That could be a problem. Well, let's not forget he pitted very early on, didn't he?
At the same pit stop as Iro, but he also had less of an opportunity to ride in the draft than Iro did.
Yeah, I wonder if Fluke... I think Fluke may have picked up a bit of damage from that opening lap carnage, Joe. And so that's why he wanted to pit as soon as the pit window was open. He just might have pit right on the threshold of when that pit window was open.
Something seems to have happened to Bertoni. Let's see if we can figure it out. We've got a replay here. It looks like, oh, he was in that chase with Murakami. Well, Murakami has basically survived everybody else, because you'll see Bertoni lose it here down in the 90, find the wall just a little bit, but it's more cost him time than anything.
You see, pit road has been quite busy the last couple of laps as we've been watching the leaders blast by it. That's not as a result of more incidents. That's, of course, all the drivers who had to pit at the end of lap 1 for the big one at the start of a race, and now all those guys are running out of fuel and serving their scheduled stop.
Speaking of running out of fuel, we were talking just a moment ago about Nom. The gap between himself and Madden has gone down by about half a second since their pit stop. And I don't know if that pays credence to Nom short pitting too much, or that maybe Madden is just naturally faster than Nom.
Well, if Nom wanted to save fuel, a little while up the road he's got the lapped car of Tom Gradwell. Maybe he could get the draft off of him. Tom Gradwell, our last drive on the lead lap, of which, despite all the early carnage, there are still 32 cars on the lead lap out here.
That impresses me as well. I thought for sure that we'd have more cars that'd be out. Maybe the damage wasn't too bad on so many of them that they were able to wait to take that first stop. Meanwhile, in 6th place, Halliburton now has Jens Nordstrom to fight with, or work with. Halliburton just recently overtook him. And I doubt that he's going to be able to drop Jens the pace that he's shown, and that will certainly drop Jens, but in the wrong way. Talked about how difficult it is trying to get through the inner loop. Even Kane Halliburton, one of the best drivers in this Spec Racer Ford, is going to fall victim to it.
It's that turn 2 curb in the loop that really seems to be the biggest one upsetting the drivers. Which is annoying because it's the one that's right there in the racing line.
Yeah, you got to be aggressive with it if you want to be fast, but also got to be safe and get to the end. Halliburton, because of that, you can see slides down to 10th position. Now, I've been keeping an eye on Jamie Fluke. Sorry to interrupt, and he's still saving. He still must be a little bit wary of how far he can go.
Well, the point I was about to make was a related point, Joe, and that's that Aero Nom is crossing the line right now with a tick over 5 minutes left on the clock. So that tells me 3 laps left to go in this race. Stevie Ray in trouble, and he just took a tow to the pits.
Murakami, we see on screen, also loops it around coming through the heel of the boot. The boot of that car swaps ends with the nose. So what happened to Stevie Ray? I missed this one. What happened, Sam?
I'm gonna pull it up on replay here. Oh, it looks like it lost under braking.
Overcorrection gone very, very bad in the chute.
Yeah, I think it's all went wrong on the entrance. Yeah, you see the whole time he's just in the slide.
And by the time the car catches, it's pointing in a direction he doesn't want to go. And then his direction is upside down, and he has to take a tow. More and more drivers proving that attrition is a factor today, and I did not account on that. See Steve
Elson in trouble. Stephen Elson.
Where is Steve Elson? I'm trying to find him on track. He is currently in 20th.
Yeah, he got it wrong at the top of the S's. His car's a bit beat up, but he's able to continue.
And that was started by Fitterer, actually. Fitterer started to spin in front of him. Elson tried to take evasive action. Wow, he was up on 2 wheels. I don't think I've ever seen a Spec racer do that in the 90.
Unfortunately, it doesn't have a good ending. Elson has had to take a tow to the pits.
Now watch the UK&I driver have to take avoidance around the outside. All that extra speed. Wow. Boy, the suspension on these cars. I know that there's a Spec Renault, a more recent version. I hope the suspension has been improved because, my goodness, bounces more than a Porsche's front end when it pogos. 2.5 minutes left to go. Ironom crossed the line recently, so he's going to get one more when he comes back to the front stretch. And he has not lost ground to Madden, so I don't think he's saving fuel anymore. John just doesn't seem to have anything for him, and he's certainly playing rear gunner from this point.
Yeah, good battle for 4 still on, but Nordstrom in trouble.
Oh, this is our leader for the Spec 2. We haven't really covered that race as much. Has he been passed by any of them?
No, he rejoins with the Spec 2 lead. He loses 3 positions on track, but they're all the Spec 1 drivers.
Scandinavian starts to lose it even before he hits that curb. The rear was really coming around. You could see it's grateful. Whoa! I'm not sure who that was that nearly hit him, but it was awful close.
Yeah, so the first battle we really have on track, Drew, is Stefanini and Fluke battling for 4th place. However, what I'm more keen to keep an eye on is when Ironom, in a few corners' time, will come through the final turn to start the final lap. Are we going to see any of our leaders have to come down pit road to get enough fuel to make it one more time around?
We'll find out in just a moment. I think Ironom's going to stay committed. I can't think of any time where he's decided I can't make it on fuel and pulls in on the final lap. As they hit this last corner, he's been dragging along Fred Desai for quite a while behind him, and he is indeed committed. So Ironom starts the final lap as the white flag waves. I'm kind of surprised that David Stefanini in that first battle he talked about between himself and Fluke, I would have thought that Stefanini, as soon as he realized that Fluke was lifting, maybe would have just let him by and almost force him to take that extra stop if he thinks he's short on fuel.
Well, they're both staying out for one more lap. That's all they have to do. Oh, Chauvin in 8th.
That was really early for Fluke to be lifting.
There's a good scrap going on behind these guys for 7th place. 3-way battle. 6th place rather. Chauvin, Perry and Halliburton. Chauvin almost got the wall coming out the final turn. He is really driving defensively, trying to maintain 6th position. But the battle for 4th is on as they go up the field. Fluke has said goodbye to his fuel-saving strategy. He's going to try and pass Stefanini now.
He manages to get by. But can he make it to the end still? He seems to feel confident, but is it enough? Meanwhile, Chauvin in a battle with Halliburton, almost going too wide into the inner loop, but they sort it out. Jason Perry rides behind them. That was Wayne Palmer that they passed in the S's, who now trails behind them. He's a lap down, so he is not in this fight. This is the closest fight we really have here up at the top of the field, and we're going to have to duck away from it pretty soon because Ironom has 2 corners to go. One more bit of traffic in the form of Todd Hansen. And actually, Madden is closing. He's chopped off half a second. But honestly, even if Ironam cruises to the line from here, I think he's got the win in the bag. Another point chopped away on the lead. Ironam is going to take the win. And Watkins Glen, his teammates, going to follow in home in second for a Bushfink 1-2. And Dimitri Hudaludis can only look on and shake his head from third.
Well, Fluke's still riding nicely in fourth position. If he's got enough fuel, he has got this finish. He's only got to navigate his way through one more turn and get on the loud pedal just enough to give enough power to cross the line. He's going to be able to do that. The battle for sixth looks like it might be over as well, with Halliburton in front there. Chauvin holding on to seventh, just ahead of Perry.
Our winner in the Spec 2 is going to be Jens Nordstrom. He's going to finish in the dizzying heights of 9th place, it looks like. He leads home the next driver back in that Spec 2 championship, Ross Nicholson, by, about a scant 5 or 6 seconds. Podium of that Spec 2 rounded out by Jeff Jacobson behind them. Boy, it's going to be a good points day for our Spec 2 drivers, that's for sure. Seeing if we have any other battles down the field. I think Andreas Bertoni has run out of fuel. Not going to finish that last lap.
That's unfortunate, because he was one of those drivers who wasn't able to turn the lap in qualifying. And Jerry McAreevy, I don't think... Has he crossed the line yet? Has the post-race demolition derby started?
I think this was a last lap accident. We're going to watch here. Yeah, that does not look intentional. That is not the racing line, Sam.
No, he's probably calling the drivers having the demolition derby down in turn 1 over, telling them to push him back to the pits. Pushing after the race is permitted in the series.
Yeah, we're going to watch it one more time, then we're going to have to leave after this. So... wow, that is a good trick, actually, managing to balance the car like that and then not able to do anything with it. As he's still sitting there, unfortunately, we're going to take a quick break here between now and the driver interviews. Also, before that, we've got the unofficial results, and between that, we'll have all the upcoming races here on the GSRC, so don't go away. Welcome back to Watkins, Glen. What a wild race we had here at round 9 of the Weekend Warriors presented by Sim Stickers. It certainly gave us a bit of unpredictability in the middle of the field, but up at the front, unfortunately, it sort of took away some of the challenge that we thought we would see. It was Ironome who took the win with incredible fuel saving that allowed him to jump his teammate, who we know is just as fast, John Madden, who finished second at a Bushfink 1-2. That closes up the gap a little bit on the points lead, and I think actually it allows Gnome to overtake in the points lead. Dimitri Hudaludis finishes in third, losing more than he'd like to because of the teammates working together up front. Jamie Fluke, who would have thought after spinning in the very first corner from the pole that he'd be able to climb all the way back up the fourth, but he did it. He had to do a little bit of fuel saving behind the driver that finished behind him. How about David Stefanini? We didn't cover this. He started 14th, managed to weave his way through all the action that we saw in that first melee, and finished in 5th. Kane Halliburton was behind them in 6th spot, with Philippe Chauvin finishing in 7th. Jason Perry comes home with 8th, with Jens Nordstrom 9th, and James DeBoer in 10th.
Then, as we go on to page number 2 here, we start with our driver in 11th. Daniel Sadro really didn't get a whole lot of screen time today, but came home with a nice finish, ahead of Ross Nicholson. I've been going back watching replays of the start. Ross Nicholson got a heck of a start, started 10th, and got up to 4th before they even got to turn 1. Chris Murakami had a couple of spins during the race. He brings it home in 13th place, ahead of Treff Jacobson. C. Love brings it home in 15th place, ahead of Donald Fitterer, who even served a penalty and still finished 16th. Treff Cantor came home in 17th, and then Paul Barbuza, one of our drivers who didn't turn a lap in qualifying, brings it home in 18th place. Carsten Rudolph had that spin on pit entry pit exit rather, that essentially handed a penalty to Donald Fitterer, trying to avoid him, while Rudolph came home in 19th, ahead of Bob Kern, who started from the pits, finishes in 20th.
Keith Walsh is among our last drivers in the lead lap in 21st. Michael Shaw behind him in 22nd. And Andreas Bertoni, because he ran out of fuel, was not able to complete that lap. Actually, I take that back. Did he get across the line? Yes, he did. He somehow managed to cross the line. 23rd, last car on the lead lap. Edward Doherty, first car lap down 21st. Jerry McAreevy just behind him in 25th. We saw how that race wound up. Ian Wilson, 26th, with Ton Hansen in 27th. Fred Desai, 28th, and Adam Bradshaw, 29th. Then in 30th, it is Wayne Palmer. Sam?
Yeah, even more drivers here, such as the size of this field. 31st place goes to Francois Van Dorneveld. Tom Gradwell comes home in 32nd, ahead of Miro Hazaski in 33rd place. Stephen Elson, our first driver multiple laps down, is in 34th, ahead of Stevie Ray. Alan Chapman, Edgar Santinelli, Francesco Bernardo, Raymond Regalado, Brian Norman, and then rounding out the field are Paul Godden and Antonio Rees.
What a day for the drivers out on track, but what a day for our winner, Ironome, as we get him pulled into the booth. Iro, it was a 1-2 for Bushfink. It seems like you're on a good swing to try and retake the championship lead.
Yeah, it was pretty much perfect race for us, so yeah, it was easy and good to work with the teammates.
At the start, there was a huge incident, and a number of drivers had to take avoiding action. From your perspective, what did you see with so many cars spreading out?
Well, I didn't see much. Jamie got very bad start, so that's why I was side of him. Maybe he got scared and he lost it outside. So, but yeah, it was perfect for me.
Certainly helped you and Jonathan. Now, talk to us about the fuel saving you managed, because you were 2 seconds quicker in your pit stall than your teammate. Were you doing a lot of lifting and coasting out there? Because I did not expect you to be able to be that much shorter on your pit stop.
Well, I did some saving, but I could have done more, but I was pump drafting, so that didn't save that much. I
can't believe that you think you could have done more, because that is an incredible amount that you were able to jump your teammate. It gave you an easy cruise to the victory. Hope to see you in a week's time as we go to Spa, where we've got even more fuel saving on tap.
Yeah, it will be a little bit harder track to say maybe, but yeah, let's see.
All right, that was our winner, Iro Nam, coming home with the lead with some help from his teammate. Sam is talking to John Madden, who finished in second today.
Hi, guys.
Yeah, hi, John. Congrats on another podium finish here today. Unfortunately, Iro did a slightly better job at saving fuel than you, and that looks like it's what ended up making a difference.
Yeah, for sure. That once we got that little lead towards the beginning, we knew exactly what we wanted to do. We swapped positions before the pit stops to make sure he didn't lose time on his in lap. And he popped out a 3-second lead on me, and we just basically cruised to the end. So that was the finish we were looking for.
Yeah. Boy, the curbs here, all race long, they were tricking cars, they were tricking drivers up, and I've raced this circuit in the Spec Racer 4 before. I know especially during the inner loop, those can really upset the vehicle. How much do you have to take that into account when you're building your setup? Because we're watching the slow motion replay right now, and you're using the curbs through the inner loop, and it doesn't seem to be upsetting your car any.
Yeah, that's a great question. I entirely set my car up for the inner loop just because I don't want to have to worry about it, because it's really stressful. Otherwise, if you grab too much inside curb on the way in, you're dead. If you grab too much second curb, you're dead. So really, I build the setup entirely around that corner, and therefore I'm probably not as fast as I could be over the course of the whole lap. But my race set is good to go.
Well, it was definitely fast enough to bring home a solid finish here today. Do you think you're going to be able to keep up this momentum, build on another podium finish, if not a win next week at Spa?
That's absolutely the plan. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And I just want to shout out to Jamie Fluke for showing up this week and running this race today. And he's been a long time supporter of this series. So thanks for him for showing up. It was a good time.
Absolutely. It was fun for us to watch as well. Well, congrats once again, Jonathan. We look forward to seeing you next week.
That was our second place finisher. And we have our third place finisher, who we didn't really cover how close things were. He might actually be thankful to be in third, because, Dimitri, let's start at the beginning with that first lap and the first corner. A lot of people fell victim, and you were almost one of them.
Yeah, hello, Joe. I have some technical issues with my microphone. I don't know if you hear me well.
We gotcha.
All right. There was some netcode contact with Kane, which damaged my car, I think. I don't know how he saved that, and nobody was close enough to give the lethal shot there. So I managed to salvage the race at that point. But I had already had some damage. Afterwards, I tried to stay with the lead pack, but unfortunately, I killed Kane at some point because he had some issues on the last sector, and I was completely confused and hadn't got into a rhythm yet. So I hope he forgives me for that. I don't usually kill people. In general, after that it was sure that Iro was going to win. I had damage. They were bump drafting. They were fuel saving. It was just unavoidable for them to lose this race.
We talked to Iro a little bit about that fuel saving next week as well. He said that he thinks it'll be harder to save at Spa. Do you think that'll allow you a little bit easier time to try and stay with him, since we know that he's so good at trying to use fuel saving to build a gap?
Next week I will also have, I hope I will also have my teammate around. He's a god, a living god in Spa, in the SRF. So I think the odds will be on our side on that one.
Well, here's hoping that you can keep the championship tight all the way down to the final to the final race. Here's a good stat for you, though. I don't know if you've heard this one yet, but you are now the only driver who has finished on the podium every single race, because last round was the first time Ironam missed the podium.
I don't think it plays such a significant role since we have so many drop weeks. So I have to maximize my best, very good podium finishes, because yeah, you may drop 1-2 races, but if the other ones are better, it doesn't play any role.
Indeed, that certainly kept it tight now. Well, congratulations on getting third and recovering from that nightmarish start here at Watkins Glen.
Thank you, Joe. See you next week. Thanks for your help in your broadcast.
That was Dimitri Houdaloutis, third place here today at Watkins Glen. And that's going to take us to wrapping up here today. Of course, we want to give a big thank you to both of our sponsors. One, to Sim Stickers. Again, if you want to check them out, it's simstickers.com. They produce stickers that you can put on your keyboard to help you identify your hotkeys. Very useful here in sim racing. And of course, also to supportforguys.com. It is a counseling service online. Highly encourage everybody to go check them out to see if you could set something up to help yourself. Mental health is extremely important. I definitely want to want everybody to know that you should take care of yourself, not just physically, but mentally too. Thanks to the companies that provide the software and hardware for our broadcast. You can see them listed here on your screen. And additional thanks go to Eric Ekholm and June Lalonde, who provide our wonderful music. See the screen for how to get a hold of more of their great work. Thanks to the team today, Sam, Amjad, and Dougie. If you'd like to find out more about GSRC, including upcoming races, you can find it at globalsimracingchannel.com. You can also check us out on social media. We're on Twitter at GSR Channel, Facebook at Global Sim Racing Channel, and Instagram at GSRC_Graham. The next race we mentioned, we're heading over to Belgium. That'll be at Spa, Sunday, November 18th at 2:45 p.m. Eastern. We also have upcoming races for other series listed on the screen, so check those out and mark them down on your calendar. That'll be it for us this weekend. We had a lot going on. Today was a lot lighter than yesterday, thankfully. However, until next time, race clean, race hard. We'll see you on the track.